And we go to these conferences like the American Geophysical Union and talk about climate change, and we go and sit in the talks, we go to the posters, and then we come home. And I know they've had this experience. You're sitting in some place, or you're outside of Bonds, and your friend stops you, and they say, well, Mark, what's this I hear about all this controversy about in the community and the scientists about global climate change? And it's sort of like someone asks you, why did you hit a giraffe with your car? Because it has nothing to do with reality. We go and argue at these conferences, it's true, but we argue about issues about, well, the radiative forcing should be 10 watts per square meter rather than 9.8, or the effect of aerosol particles is this. And that's what we argue about and those sort of things. But whether or not there's global warming is not an issue. So what's going on? What's going on in the public? Why is the perception not there? Why is the communication not there? What are the issues? And the fact of the matter is, we don't necessarily make a living dealing with the media or journalists as a full-time occupation. My colleague at UCSD, Naomi Oreskes, as I said, has her Ph.D. Both in the history of science and in geology from Stanford University. She's a card-carrying field geologist who knows what she's talking about. Her specialty is in the history of science and the history of knowledge and how it's disseminated. And the reason we've invited her here is, especially in December, she published an article in Science. And in that article, she culled from 1,000 different abstracts from the scientific literature, different papers on global warming. And every single paper that was written out of those thousands, there was no disagreement whether or not there's global warming. And this comes straight from the scientific literature, where one hears that there's all of these disagreements. So that's drawn a lot of interest in the public, and so we thought it would be interesting for you to hear Naomi's perspective.
So that's your basic claim. We've changed the chemistry of the atmosphere in ways that affect the way radiant energy is absorbed and scattered. Most of the observed warming over the last 50 years is likely to have been due to the increase in greenhouse gas concentrations. So again, nobody's saying that all climate change is caused by greenhouse gases. Nobody could make that claim responsibly because we know there is natural variability in climate. Nobody is saying that any of this can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, because nothing in science can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. But a responsible way of thinking about what we know is that most of the observed warming over the last 50 years is likely to have been due to the increase in greenhouse gas concentrations. It's what you would expect to happen based on theoretical principles, and it's what the empirical evidence shows us is, in fact, happening. Moreover, and this is a really important point that I think has been missed by the US media in many cases, it's not just the IPCC. Some people have accused the IPCC of being a political organization, and in some sense that's true because it's partly the brainchild of the United Nations, which is a political organization, and it does have a political mandate because part of what IPCC does is to look at potential policy responses. So it is true to say that the IPCC is not, strictly speaking, a scientific organization in the way that a historian of science might understand the way scientific organizations have historically been organized. But it's not just the IPCC that is making these claims. Rather, the results of the IPCC have been affirmed by every major American scientific society with relevant expertise. So the American Geophysical Union, the American Meteorological Society, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and the US National Academy of Sciences have all issued reports, statements, created web pages, or otherwise issued statements clearly agreeing with the claims of the IPCC and clearly stating that there is a scientific consensus on the basic parameters of climate change. The US National Academy of Sciences report is particularly interesting because it explicitly addresses the question, is the IPCC summary an accurate reflection of what the scientific community says? They pose that question on the very first page of the report, and they say, yes, it is.